Next, we have Chair of Filecoin Foundation and General Counsel at Protocol Labs, Marta Belcher, joining us. Through her work, she looks at civil liberties issues related to blockchain and decentralization. Welcome, Marta.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good to have you, Marta. Well, first off, can you perhaps give us an introduction to Filecoin, perhaps offer some use case examples to help our audience understand what it is and how it works?
Sure, absolutely. One of the coolest things, of course, about blockchain is that it allows you to effectively program your money. And a lot of people have talked about Filecoin as effectively Airbnb for file storage. So the idea here is that you can take your files, put them on other people's hardware, and pay people for storing those files. The reason that's important is because it adds an incentive layer to the decentralized web. The same team had previously built IPFS, which is a decentralized storage network, and that's great, but it didn't have the incentives to keep these files on the network. So if someone is storing a file and they close up their hardware, they close their computer for a few days, that file just goes away. It isn't on the network anymore. So we need this incentive layer in order to enable us to ensure that information is persisting on the network.
Good morning. What are some of the legal and regulatory issues that Filecoin might face? Because I assume that some of the issues that you would personally be looking at.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I wear several hats. One of my hats is actually that I'm special counsel at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and then I'm also board chair of the Filecoin Foundation. And so in those roles, I focus a lot on privacy and civil liberties and issues involving cryptocurrency and surveillance. And so those are issues that I think everyone in the crypto space should care deeply about, because I think increasingly in the past year we've been seeing regulators around the world really increasing financial surveillance, and they've really it's really been a push to take the surveillance of the traditional banking system and apply it to cryptocurrency. So that's something I'm thinking a lot about, and that I'm spending a lot of time personally working on.
So I guess on that note, we've been talking a lot about central bank digital currencies and, the potential for surveillance or privacy. How much are you concerned about that? And is it possible for the US to issue a digital dollar that really protects privacy and doesn't get into the sort of surveillance business?
I'm very concerned about that, actually. I think central bank digital currencies, when I think about them, I think about this photo that came out of the Hong Kong protests. There are these pictures, and there are all these protesters lined up in subway stations. And they're in these long lines because they want to buy their tickets to the train in cash. And to me, that really underscores that a surveillance society is one in which there is no cash, where you have your financial transactions tracking you, and where if the government can see that you bought a train ticket here, and so we know you were at the scene of the protest. And so for me, that really underscores this idea that having all of these transactions recorded and available to the government is very potentially concerning for civil liberties. So I'm very concerned about CBDCs from a privacy and civil liberties perspective, and definitely worried about giving that type of financial data to the government by default, which is something that unfortunately has been increasingly what the government has been pushing for.
So one of the things that you have in Europe is the right to be forgotten. How does Filecoin deal with that? In other words, the ability to have your name not appear in certain searches and the like. It's something that doesn't necessarily exist in the United States, and can cause reputational harm and the like. And it's one of the reasons why Europe has implemented it. So if the world were to all of a sudden go to Filecoin tomorrow, what happens then?
Yeah, so content moderation issues are huge today in all over the internet, Web 2 and Web 3, and we actually have a really interesting approach to it. So there's an organization called Murmuration Labs that is basically like the content policy shop for the decentralized web, run by Alex Fierst, the former general counsel of Medium and an expert in the content policy space. And Murmuration Labs is building tools on top of Filecoin that actually allow for decentralized content moderation. So you can do the same content moderation that you would be doing, on a Facebook or a Twitter, but instead of some central intermediary making those decisions are decentralized at a node by node level. And so it's taking this content moderation and actually putting it into the hands of a bunch of individual users, node operators, and taking this content moderation and scaling it in a way that works for the decentralized web. So we're doing a lot of really interesting and cool.
But if it goes to a decentralized situation versus a court, isn't it going to be much harder for people to, for instance, protect their reputation, or companies to protect their reputation, and basically the ability to counter slander?
So right now on Web 2, like if you want to go take something down, there isn't necessarily one central intermediary that you are sending the takedown to, because content is on all sorts of different platforms, right? And so this is sort of a similar system in which there are many different nodes, and you have the ability to contact individual node operators. However, the thing that's really cool about the tools that we're building is it gives you the ability to actually create and curate lists that node operators are subscribing to and gateway operators are subscribing to. And so you can have a list that says, that is sort of populated with content, and you can have node operators and gateway operators subscribe to these lists, which enables them to automatically block the content that's on those lists. So it's actually a really interesting way of doing content moderation, and it works in large part because the way that IPFS works is that content is all identified by a content ID rather than by its location. So on Web 2, you have to go to a specific location on the web in order to have that website, that content served to you, whereas in IPFS, you just need to know the content ID and you can get to that particular content. So it's a different set of restraints that actually allows for a much more interesting way of doing decentralized content moderation.
Marta, yesterday we spoke to Dfinity. They are also launching a decentralized blockchain or internet computer. I wonder how Filecoin differentiates itself from other competitors out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Filecoin network right now, it's been a long time coming, and we had a really terrific launch back in October. We're now up over 4 exabytes of data on available on our storage network, and I think that Filecoin is very exciting because it builds on top of IPFS and is something that really adds an incentive layer to this technology that's been around now for 6 years plus. So very excited about where we are network-wise and where we're going in the future.
With all the interest in ESGs and the problem of energy usage, is Filecoin getting a lot of attention right now? What's going on there?
Well, no, Chia is getting a lot of attention right now. I think in terms of energy usage, that's definitely something that's really interesting and an important part of the discourse today. And when it comes to coins that are energy inefficient, I think we're lucky to not be one of the ones that's in the headlines these days. We're not bricking any hard drives, which is great. So that is.
But is there a concern in the design of tokenization, blockchain technology, that these servers, these nodes that are created, do use an exorbitant amount of energy? Is that a concern taken into the design of the network?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because it's a big part of the scalability of the network as well. And we've seen these big changes with ETH just in the past days to become more energy efficient. And I think it's something that for the entire blockchain space is really important for scalability and really important also, I think, from a legal and regulatory perspective. We're really seeing just in the last couple of weeks that regulators all over the world really care about this, and that it's a potentially, important problem, not just for the scalability of the network, but also for the messaging to the public and to regulators.